This is big. Over 2,000 Britons are now believed to have served for the Israeli military. Obviously, this is in the context of the genocide Israel has been perpetrating against the Palestinian people. Way more than the figures we had to begin with, certainly. And this obviously is amidst, as we know at the moment, the legal case involving Palestine Action, which was prescribed as a terrorist organisation. So the state is clamping down on grannies holding placards opposing genocide, whilst British nationals are en masse serving in a genocidal army. Now, this is down to the brilliant, always investigative work of Declassified UK. And I'm really delighted to be joined by John McAvoy, who's been working on this story. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us, always. Just to start, I mean, this figure, can you just explain, how did you find out it's this number? Because, you know, we knew there was a certain number of people, of Brits going abroad. Some of them have been boasting about serving in the IDF, including in Gaza. Tell us how you've got to these figures.
Yeah, so we've been trying to find out this figure for a very long time, and it's been more or less impossible to do so in the UK because the Foreign Office says it doesn't collect, incredibly, data on the number of Britons who are going to serve in a genocidal army. So what we did was we managed to get the information via a Freedom of Information Act, which was submitted to the IDF in Israel, and we asked for the number of dual nationals and people of multiple nationalities, so British, Israeli, and any number of other nationalities who were serving in the IDF. Now that was back in March 2025, and we only got the data last week. And what it showed was, over 2,000 Britons serving in the IDF, several thousand French, Russians, Ukrainians, and several other different nationalities. And it's important to note before this, we only had the data on the lone soldiers who had come from Britain without any family, hadn't been naturalised as Israeli citizens, but were fighting for the IDF. And that number was as low as 54. So obviously the number of dual nationals and multiple nationalities from Britain with a British passport is significantly higher. And it raises serious questions, serious legal questions, and also serious questions for Palestinians in the UK and people in the UK. I mean, as someone commented in the article, nobody wants to live next to a war criminal.
Well, indeed. I mean, just before we talk about the kind of that legal angle and British involvement, I mean, over 50,000 IDF soldiers with Israeli and at least one other nationality, which is extraordinary, leaving aside, you know, the genocidal nature of the Israeli army. But just in terms of, I guess it fleshes out kind of settler colonialism, because it's extremely irregular for an army to have that number of people with dual nationality, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's important to know the amount of Europeans that are kind of topping the list there. And yeah, I mean, it's people joining what is effectively a settler colonial movement, the sharp end of a settler colonial movement. And I mean, as we mentioned in the article, based on a great investigation by Hamza Youssef for Declassified many months ago, I mean, what these people have been doing in Gaza is absolutely horrendous. One of them, named Levi Simon, had been rummaging through a Palestinian house, going through a woman's underwear, showing them on the camera. That's the kind of things that these people are up to in Gaza, and I think that really reflects the settler colonial mindset of the people that do this.
So just on that, because obviously we've got, you know, over 2,000 Britons, and we know that the Israeli army has perpetrated every single war crime and crime against humanity under the sun. But obviously we don't know all those specific crimes that those 2,000 Brits have been involved with, but we do know with some, don't we? We do know that evidence and allegations which have been submitted against specific British nationals, rather than the wider point here of if we have British nationals taking part in a genocide, then obviously they're part of an overall war crime and crime against humanity. But that's the point, isn't it? That there's also evidence which has been submitted against specific British nationals.
Yeah, exactly. A 240-page report was submitted to the Metropolitan Police's War Crimes Unit last year by the Public Interest Law Centre and the Palestinian Human Rights Organisation. And they specifically named 10 different Britons who they'd collected information on, who they suspected were involved with war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. Now, what the Metropolitan Police's War Crimes Unit has done with this report remains unclear. I mean, there's been 0 prosecutions as far as we're aware. And none of these Britons who have gone to fight in Gaza and returned to Britain have even had as much as a police interview at the airport. And obviously, as you said at the start of this interview, that stands in stark contrast with what's going on the ground in Britain, where you've got pensioners, young people, students, disabled people, you name it, being arrested for alleged under the Terrorism Act. Over 2,700 people have now been arrested, and these people are, say they're, fundamentally trying to prevent genocidal crimes abroad. So you've got this quite incredible double standards going on at the moment.
Just what is the legal context of this? Because as we know, a direct action group has been prescribed as though they're on an equal legal playing field as ISIS and Al Qaeda, with up to 14 years imprisonment. But so, what does the law say about taking part in an army or becoming a soldier in an army, a foreign army, which is perpetrating genocide and war crimes and crimes against humanity?
Yeah, so I think there are serious implications for the UK government, first of all, without going into the actual individuals themselves. Obviously, in January 2024, the International Court of Justice put all member states on notice that they shouldn't facilitate, aid, or abet the genocide that was going on, the plausible genocide that was going on in Gaza. Now, clearly, the Foreign Office not monitoring, not tracking, not collecting intelligence on what British passport holders are doing in Gaza amid the genocide clearly has implications for the UK government. It's not sufficient for the Foreign Office to say, oh, well, we haven't collected any data on it, therefore we can wash our hands of it. That's not how international law works, unfortunately, for the Foreign Office, unfortunately for the likes of David Cameron, David Lammy, David Lammy's the Foreign Office Minister for the Middle East, Hamish Falconer, and so on and so forth. So that's I think the main point. But in terms of the individuals themselves, I mean, they could be prosecuted under universal jurisdiction potentially. But there's also the Foreign Enlistment Act in the UK, which is quite an antiquated law. I think it goes back to the 1800s, but it effectively says that it's illegal to fight for one army against another state that is at peace with the UK. Now, since the UK has recognised a Palestinian state, it would therefore seem to follow that those Britons serving for the IDF at war with the Palestinians should therefore be subject to criminal proceedings in the UK. Now, given it's such an antiquated law, it seems like relatively unlikely that is going to be used, and if it is used, that it would actually be successful. But I think the broader issue is much more important. It's less about these individuals enlisting with a foreign army, right? It's more about that they're engaged in an active genocide. I'm not saying all of them, but certainly some of them have been engaged in an active genocide, the crime of all crimes.
And I mean, the International Criminal Court, of course, which Britain is a founding member of, has issued arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister for war crimes and crimes against humanity. So they're wanted men. So the point there is that's to do with the war. That's a court we're signed up to, which has charged the leaders of that state with war crimes against humanity being perpetrated by soldiers.
Yeah. And I mean, at the same time, you've got several different high-ranking senior Israeli political and military figures visiting the UK throughout the genocide, talking about the likes of Tomer Bar, who was the Israeli Air Force chief, talking about Herzi Halevi, who was the Israeli chief of staff, talking about Major General Oded Basiuk. These have all visited the UK during the genocide. They attempted to visit secretly. And we found out subsequently that not only were they, welcomed onto British soil by the British state, they were given something called special mission status, which is a kind of official decree which protects them from prosecution for war crimes. So the UK government is simultaneously not tracking these British people who are joining the IDF, simultaneously inviting Israeli military officials, high-ranking, fully complicit in the genocide, and protecting them from prosecution. So you can basically see how the UK is creating kind of judicial framework to protect anyone who's complicit in this genocide, and it's abhorrent. I
mean, it is interesting, isn't it, that there have been cases in other countries of Israeli soldiers who have been investigated by by police officers, for example, legal complaints have been submitted. I mean, do you think we could be seeing more of that? That could be the kind of general trajectory, because the Israeli army told their soldiers to stop posting all these videos online, and what that includes obviously is soldiers, as you say, going through the underwear of women. That became a massive thing they kept doing over and over again, as well as, for example, blowing up civilian infrastructure with no military purpose whatsoever, which poses no threat to them, just a blatant war, universities, mosques, libraries, that kind of thing. And obviously they're not likely to be filming the vast majority of what they're actually doing. But what do you think about that? There has been this growing, the Hind Rajab Foundation, for example, pushing to get individual soldiers arrested and charged.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important what the Hind Rajab Foundation and other organisations are doing in Europe and elsewhere. But I think it's important to go back a little bit. So back in the early 2000s, in 2004, I believe, a private arrest application under similar jurisdiction, under universal jurisdiction, which effectively allows for the worst crimes to be punished in any jurisdiction, regardless of where they were committed. And so an application was put in for this Israeli general, and he learnt about it on the tarmac of Heathrow Airport, and then he never actually got off his plane. Eventually, the police at Heathrow Airport actually didn't want to board the plane because they were worried that a firefight would occur on the tarmac of Heathrow Airport. That general went back to Israel and he wasn't prosecuted. And there were several subsequent cases, including that of the former Israeli Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, and all of them got quite close to prosecution, but they didn't actually get that far. Now, that situation massively concerned the Israeli government. So the Israeli government during the 2000s and 2010s basically lobbied the UK government to water down its own legislation on universal jurisdiction, and that included passing the authority to issue an arrest application onto the the DPP at the Crown Prosecution Service. So, for instance, it was none other than Keir Starmer who blocked the arrest application for Tzipi Livni back in 2011. And ever since then, it's become more and more difficult to prosecute alleged Israeli war criminals on British soil, precisely because the Israeli government, as we've reported in Declassified UK before, has launched this lobbying campaign to make it very, very difficult to do so. So that's the background to that effort. So for that reason, I think it is going to be difficult for private arrest applications to be issued against Israeli military and other officials in the UK. So I think it's very important that we push for the ICC arrest applications to be honoured and for those to be widened as well.
And just a couple of final things. I mean, one is that the British government has actually offered support to lone soldiers in Israel before, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the incredible findings of our article. Back in 2021, I believe, a British Royal Navy ship welcomed a young soldier from Manchester, originally from Manchester, called James Schreier, onto the warship. He was given a tour of the warship. He met with Colonel Jim Priest, who at that time was the British Defence Attaché in the British Embassy in Israel. And so these British soldiers in the IDF were basically given a royal welcome onto this warship. And I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of relationship between the British Embassy in Israel and these Britons serving in the IDF continues today. And it's quite a unique situation to have the British Army and the British Navy welcoming and supporting Brits who have joined another army. I mean, this is, to me, it seems incredibly unique.
Final point, I think I'm just interested in terms of what you think about the fact that Wes Streeting, who's the Secretary of State for Health, has in private messages he's released with Peter Mandelson, he released them because he wants to stand for leader, just so everyone's clear, and he wanted to take the sting out of his involvement with Peter Mandelson. That's the general gist. But in any case, what was interesting is he said in these about last year, best part of a year ago, that Israel was committing war crimes in front of our very eyes. Now, I mean, on one level, it's completely ridiculous that we even have to indulge that as a debate or discussion. Obviously, what he wrote is true. It's just the sky is blue. Israel has committed grievous war crimes of every description in front of our very eyes. But the fact is, the government hasn't said that, because if it says Israel is committing war crimes, that then imposes a whole range of legal obligations on them, doesn't it? So don't you think this is quite interesting that one of the most senior members of the British government has admitted in private that Israel, which Britain continues, for example, to provide crucial components for F-35 jets, is committing war crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And shame on Wes Streeting. He remained in a government which he privately acknowledged, was he remained in a government while he privately acknowledged Israel's committing war crimes. And we all know, he knows, that the UK government has been providing military, intelligence, economic, diplomatic support to Israel throughout this entire time. And so, in effect, he's acknowledging that the UK government itself was complicit in the war crimes that he knows Israel was committing. So I think shame on him for staying in the government. Shame on Wes Streeting for publishing these messages only in order to keep his seat, to try and keep his seat in Ilford North, and by extension to put himself in place to succeed Starmer. He is one of the most cynical things that I've seen, but it is nonetheless incredible to see for the first time a cabinet minister in the Labour government has admitted to Israel's war crimes only to preserve their own political career. That says everything that you need to know about Keir Starmer's government, to be honest.
Absolutely. It should be treated as a confession. Brilliant stuff. Absolutely crucial work from Declassified UK. So do check, we'll share the link, but do check out always their work at declassifieduk.org. Press like, subscribe, leave your thoughts, leave your comments, share the video. But really appreciate, as ever, your work, John.
No, thank you for having me.